4:04, we'll call our meeting order.
Board Member Wayne. Here. Board Member Martin. Board Member Walkup.
Here.
Board Member Tiffany. Here. Board Member Fonseca.
Here.
Board Member Gomez.
Here.
Board Member Dement. Board Member Casares. Present. Board Member Blackman. Here. Vice Chair Castanos. Here. Chair Johnson.
Here. Next item 1.1 is a pledge of allegiance. Everybody will turn and face the flag. I'll lead us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 2, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
None.
We're on to item number 3, which is public comments, and I believe we have some of those.
Yes, we have one public comment. Andy, you may go ahead and make your comment. You have 3 minutes.
Cool, I don't need 3. Thanks y'all. I just wanted to check back in and see if you could get the updated info on the racial and forget the name, Racial and Identity Profiling Act report that was due in April. I'd love if you could make that an agenda item for the next meeting. Because I'd love to dig into that data. Any information on that would be super appreciated. Thanks.
There are no more comments at this moment.
Thank you. Item number 4, conflict disclosures. Okay. Item number 5, our current business. 5.1 is approval of the minutes for the Community Police Oversight Board regular meeting held August 16, 2023.
John Fonseca so moves.
I'll second.
Board Member Wayne, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Walkup, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Board Member Tiffany, how do you vote?
Abstain, sorry.
Board Member Fonseca, how do you vote?
Approved.
Board Member Gomez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Casares, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Board Member Blackman, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Vice Chair Castanos, how do you vote?
Yes.
Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Yes.
So I wanted to inform everyone, when you're voting abstaining, even though you weren't at the meeting, does not mean you can't vote on the minutes. You can review the minutes and look at them and still vote on them, even if you did not attend the meeting. With that many abstentions, we're not going to be able to pass the minutes. So we can either retake the vote, and those who abstained can choose to vote yes or no, or we can have it fail today and bring it back at the next meeting. But just so you're aware, in the future, when it comes to the minutes, just because you were not at the meeting does not mean you need to abstain from voting on the minutes. Since they are part of the packet, you can review them, and if you feel that that is a reflection of what occurred at the meeting, and again, the video is online as well, then you are able to vote on the minutes. If we want to take another roll call vote for the minutes, we'll go ahead and do the vote again.
Board Member Wayne?
Yes.
Board Member Walkup?
Yes.
Board Member Tiffany?
Yes.
Board Member Fonseca?
Yes.
Board Member Gomez?
Yes.
Board Member Casares?
Yes.
Board Member Blackman?
Abstain.
Vice Chair Castanos?
Yeah.
Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes with all well, not all board members voting yes, but Board Member Blackman abstaining.
Item 5.2, La Mesa Police Department updates.
Thank you, Chair. First off, good to see everybody. I wanted to start because they have some officers in the back. They're here and they are very busy. So I wanted, it's always an honor when I get to introduce some of our newer officers. They're here. All three of these officers are currently in training. So we're excited to have them here, but I'll first introduce Allison Granillo. Allison, you stand up. Allison came to us, she was our dispatcher. And we ended up being fortunate enough to hire her and send her to the police academy. So we're excited for Allison to be here. And, hello, or you can speak. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, I was a dispatcher here for almost 3 years and then transitioned over. So the academy. It's a year. Graduating, so.
Thanks, Allison. Next is Joseph Kamendali. Joseph just graduated the academy. So he's in his very first phase, but we're excited to have him here. So Joseph, you want to say hi to the board?
Of course. Hello, everybody. Thank you for just being here. And just a little bit of history. I don't even know what to say, but just a little bit of history of myself. I came here originally. My last name is Capandali. Most people ask me where that's from. I came here at the age of 7 from the Congo, Central Africa. Came here at the age of 7 and settled down in City Heights, which is close by. That's where my inspiration to be a police officer started. Just kind of seeing the gangs over there, the high rate crimes that was occurring in that area where I appreciated what the police officer did for my community. La Mesa is pretty good overall, good city. I don't know what to say, sorry. But overall, it's a good city to work for. I appreciate the chief giving me the opportunity to work for this great city. So just thank you all.
Thanks, Joseph. And then last but not least is Ashley Oopers. And Ashley came to us, she actually went to the academy with Allison. So Allison, by word of mouth, and by seeing what La Mesa PD is all about, we were fortunate to take Ashley from another agency here in the county. But she came over to us, so we're excited to have her here too. Ashley.
Hello all. So yes, I came from the sheriff's department. So I was there for a couple months and then my good friend partner over here, she talked me into coming over here. It's been great so far. Everyone's been great. Great department to work for. It's like a family and I love it so far. So a big change. I started in the medical field and switched over to law enforcement and I love it. So happy to be here.
Right. You guys. I appreciate you coming out. Next, I want to move into our staffing. As you can see, we've got these 3 great officers that are in training, so we're very fortunate to have them here with our department. Currently, we are 4 officers down. I believe last I talked to you, we were 5 officers down, and we're 1 dispatcher down. I recently gave a conditional job offer to a lateral police officer in the city of Petaluma. So he will be starting here hopefully in the next week. Really looking forward to that. He has a skateboarding skill that is going to be very good for our community. So that teaser out there. So we're always looking for, the benefit of what a person can bring to this community. What are they bringing in from outside? Who are they as a person? What have they experienced? And with that, there's some trainings that I'm gonna talk about here in a minute that are available for the CPOB members on how we hire folks. And that's, extremely important to know. We're currently doing our staffing study. I mentioned that before. That's ongoing. It did get delayed a little bit with vacations and obviously critical incident that we had that delayed it just a little bit. But we expect to do a mid-project update in October. And what that is, again, I'll just let you know, is they're looking into, how is our staffing here based on our calls for service, the volume of things that we're responding to, the multiple hats that sometimes smaller departments wear, and are we using it efficiently? totally fine with somebody coming in and saying, you should probably do it this way because that would make more sense, because it's just like with the police oversight board, and I've told you this before, you see things sometimes that I may not. And so that's the intent, look at technology, maybe we're not leveraging yet, or we could be leveraging. Additions of civilian personnel in different areas, additions of dispatchers, police officers, it's all inclusive. So really looking forward to the conclusion of that study, which we expect probably at the end of January, probably into February, to be completed. It's quite an endeavor. We also had, unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, but Officer Cynthia Gutierrez, she finished her field training. And so she's on her own, so she's working this evening. But she's doing very well. And I keep saying the word she, and we have 22% female staff in our sworn staff. I believe that we are the highest in the county for sworn female officers. So that's definitely something for the community to be proud of. I'm very proud of it. We're going to continue that. We're looking at an expansion of locker rooms, gym facilities, just to make sure that we have that. A bunch of different things are being looked at, to include even pregnancy policy. How to best take care of our female employees and invite them in to this world that has been predominantly men for many years. But I will take all the female officers I can get. So if you know anybody, please word of mouth, send them our way. Again, I said we have 4 openings. Our Citizens Academy applications are currently open. So our Citizens Academy will run from October 12th to November 16th. And I know that sounds like a very scary long time, but really it's 1 day a week for 6 weeks. Beginning October 12th and ending November 16th. So you can go to our website, it's on our Facebook, and put in an application for that. I believe last year we had 20 or 21 attendees. It's a great program where you can see the internal workings of the police department, what we do, get to meet our officers, get to meet our dispatchers, and just get to know your police department. We had September 7th and 9th, we had 2 community listening sessions. I mentioned before we had that staffing study. That staffing study, I asked them to do 2 community listening sessions to get input from our community. So that happened on Thursday the 7th and on Saturday the 9th of September. They were moderately attended. I know that some of the CPOB members attended the first one, and I appreciate that. The second one, we were still about the same numbers. So we're looking at different ways, when we move forward with my community meetings, not necessarily the staffing study, as to how we can expand that audience. And where it will go, because it's not always good being here. We're happy to go out in the community and do it too. So we're looking at some of those. Next week, on the 28th, the La Mesa Arts Academy is hosting a first responder lunch. They do it every year. So our officers, firefighters, and even our public works personnel will be out there with kids, having a lunch, having a conversation. It's always a great time to listen to some of the questions that come up. And just to see the usefulness of the kids and their excitement to see law enforcement, firefighters, and public works now. There's tons of trades out there, and this community, the city offers a lot. I talked about the training for CPOB members. So we have 3 sessions that we set up. We'll get these mailed out to you so that you can choose one if it works for you. All sessions are from 4 to 5 p.m., 4 to 4:30, depending on how many we get. But we're looking at maybe 4 people per session. Since we have 11 board members, I think we can do 4, 4, and 3 and get that done. But Monday, October 9th, Wednesday, October 11th, and Monday, October 16th. You don't have to write it down. We'll get it sent out to you so that you can check and hopefully attend one of those. And on that note, I really encourage ride-alongs. So those of you in here that have been on ride-alongs, I appreciate. For those of you that haven't had an opportunity yet, please do. It's not here. So T Snyder, SNYDER at cityoflamesa.us, and he'll get you hooked up for a ride-along. I really think it's just an eye-opener to get out there and talk to our officers, see what they do in their work environment, see who they talk to, what calls they're responding to. It's really, in my opinion, very eye-opening. So if you get an opportunity to do that, I know you're all busy, but if you do, please get a hold of Sergeant Snyder. And then transitioning kind of the city has a climate action plan. And, we're working on going carbon neutral by 2035, and kind of changing things in that way. So what we've done here at our police department is we've transitioned just about every one of our police cars now to a hybrid. That took a while because hybrids, as you may have read in some articles, are back ordered and take a while. We're fortunate we just got our last 4 in. So we have 4 more hybrids to add to the fleet. And on that note, we also want to start transitioning some of our vehicles that can be transitioned to electric. I just took the first leap, so I had to replace my staff vehicle. It got replaced with the Ford Mustang Mach-E. So we'll see. We don't have a lot of infrastructure yet. That's something we're working on as a city, but that's the first step moving forward, is starting to get those electric vehicles in our fleet with the police department, so we can help the city meet their goal. Let's see, and on October 10th, we will be presenting to the city council. I think I may have mentioned this before, but in our budget, we purchased the flock camera system. It's a license plate reader flock camera system. El Cajon PD rolled that out. They're having a ton of success in that. The flock safety cameras, and we'll go into more detail at the presentation, but that's a license plate reader that reads from the rear. So, it's set up to read rear license plates. So you're not looking into a vehicle or tracking where people goes, and they only stay in our system for a certain amount of time. It can only be accessed for criminal investigations. So, it's one other tool that we're trying to add to the tool bag to help solve the crime rates here in the city. So October 10th, city council meeting, if you have an opportunity to go to that, there'll be more information from Flock Safety itself and my staff members. And that concludes my update. Thank you.
A question on the rear, what do you mean by that?
So license plate readers generally will read front or rear plates, whether somebody's coming or going. That can be good or bad. There's been privacy issues that have been brought up about
front, you can see the
right?
faces.
Seeing somebody in a car. So the flock system, the way it's set up for when cars are outgoing certain areas, they're picking up rear license plate. I don't want to give out too much information because then folks are going to just change their plates.
Yeah.
But that's kind of one of the ways that flock safety has improved the game, if you will, as far as license plate readers.
So you can go the opposite direction.
Yeah, so they're posted on entries and exits into the city. That's where we want to have them. We think we get a lot of stolen cars, wanted cars that we can find and stop before they end up going and victimizing anybody else in our city. That's typically what happens. We've seen that quite a bit with stolen vehicles coming to the city to commit other crimes. And so we, like other cities, want to find tools to prevent that, but still it's a fair tool to use.
Did you say it was flock system?
Flock,
FLOC.
FLOCK.
And I think it's important to note that you cannot report somebody if they're here illegally, or you can't report somebody to Border Patrol or something like that. That's illegal. You can only take care of criminal activity. So if anybody's concerned about that, because I think a lot of people worry about license plate readers and feel that, oh gosh, they're gonna find out I'm here, I crossed the border, and it's not about that. You do not
Yeah,
work
we
with
don't-
ICE.
You're absolutely right there. We don't share any information with US Border Patrol, with ICE or any federal agencies for that reason alone.
Okay. Okay, thanks. There were some questions that came up at a community meeting. I don't know if, I had mentioned those questions. I don't know if you want to address some of them or if we should agendize them or. So. Basically, I asked if we should agendize them, and I think Lynn was saying it could probably be covered in your.
Yeah, over a series of meetings, because it's quite lengthy.
Can we do one of or two of them today or?
I can sure try. I don't have my staff here today. But
Oh, yeah. Well, and maybe, if it's not if you need more time, but like, one of the questions that came up was human trafficking. How are officers trained to identify signs? Is that something that they go through a training for human
Yeah,
trafficking?
so there's post-training, there are peace officer standards and training where they get additional skills. We have a human trafficking task force in the county. And so there are times where they'll come out and do some additional training. They send out BOLs, which is be on the lookouts, training updates that come through, mostly through post, which is peace officer standards and training to the officers. And there's a block on recognizing signs of human trafficking, abuse, and things like that in the police academy.
Oh, good. And then you work with like local schools when they have some concerns. That I know Grossmont Union High School District has people that is their job to address human trafficking on their campuses. And I'm sure they work with you if it's a La Mesa school.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our phone line is open. They can call us anytime. We have a detective that does sex crimes, human trafficking. That's their specialty assignment. And we also work with the La Mesa Chamber of Commerce to put stickers. They're in restrooms where people may go and use the restroom. This is the 800 number to call if you want to get help, or text. So there's that avenue too. And we did that at, I believe, 25 locations in the city, all around at major retailers, at city restrooms, things of that nature. Because we know, I mean, we read the stories of people that, go into a restroom or mouth to somebody, I need help. They may not always have the time to get away from their attacker, that person. So this is just another opportunity that we put into the city with the help of the La Mesa Chamber.
And another one that came up was drone use. And there were a number of, I don't know if that's something you want to deal with as a presentation in and of itself, because it's probably involves a lot.
If I can interject here,
Sure.
these seem to be more informational pieces versus necessarily an update that's usually like on staffing or things like that. So we're going a little bit off topic here.
Okay.
So if you want to send those topics, get it to either Amanda or Lynn, and we can discuss with the chief what to put on a future agenda and when to agendize, and just do a short, brief informational piece if needed, because this is a bit off topic from the updates.
I think with drones, I'm happy to present that. But we have a sergeant that's in charge of our drones. We don't have a big program like Chula Vista, so it's not this, I would love to have it, but we don't have it at this time. But they can definitely go into our policy on drones, what we do, retention of the videos, how we use that, is so that the board can get more information on that.
Yeah, let's do it that way. We'll agendize it.
One comment and one quick question. My comment is really great to hear that we have 22% female sworn staff, and excited to see that number even go up. So thank you for sharing that with us. And my question, well, commendation first on the electric vehicles. That's fantastic. You said the ones that you can, is it because of like the range of distance they can go, or the age of the vehicle, or like what's the short version of?
The short version, well, great question. Infrastructure doesn't exist right now.
Right.
In what we need. Two, if we looked at this, if we have a mutual aid, we send our police officers into a fire to assist with the wildfires like we've had before. They're in these remote areas, and is there a charging area for them to do that? So, so that was one of our considerations.
Yeah.
For that. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but when it does happen, we're taking our vehicles and we're going over there and assisting with any mutual aid in the county, whether it's an earthquake or fire. And we've experienced fires here far too often, but that's one of the main reasons.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Well, Chief, for using an electric vehicle, would you prefer, and I'm just saying, would you prefer to keep the gas vehicle because the electric vehicle has a longer charge time, so that puts an officer out of service?
We looked at that too. So I actually did a presentation to the city council, I believe it was 2 years ago. And so we looked at kind of all those things. And if we're inside the city and we're driving, we come back and we do reports, the officer can easily plug that in and charge it. And especially if we have a supercharger here in the station, I don't think that's going to be a a worry. It's just the long term of going out into a mutual aid situation. But around town, the things that we were doing, if that's all we were doing, I think it's very doable.
You know, will you keep a certain amount of hybrids just to back up the electric vehicles? Or are you trying to move everything towards electric as patrol cars?
No, I just don't think that I don't think we're there yet for full electric conversion. We will have the hybrids and we got rid of the gas vehicles, so all gas, so now it's the hybrids, so we're definitely saving money on fuel there. But not anytime soon, and the vehicles that I'm talking about that we can replace, like, mine driving back and forth, going out to scenes, that's an easy one. I think our parking control, eventually we can do that because they're gonna stay in the city. We have our community service officers, those vehicles typically stay in the city, we can replace those with electric. So there's things that we can do as we move down the line when those vehicles come up for renewal, when we age out.
Typically, how long does a cruiser stay in service a day?
It depends on the volume. But in service, it could be, you're working a 12-hour shift, you're probably in service for, 6 to 8 of those hours. So, coming back, plugging in, we do a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
So we write a lot of reports, they do training when they come in, but when they're actually going call to call or actually patrolling out in the streets, 6 to 8 hours. Probably the average.
And they're on 12 hours?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had a question about one of the topics from the last meeting. Regarding the anti-Semitic literature that we spread. Any press releases that the police department's doing on that? Any plans to do that? And any updates or other information related to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you, I told the chair and the vice chair, there are some particulars to this case to where the person that we know is doing it can't wait for us to do that. And incites them. And so we've been working directly with the Anti-Defamation League, with San Diego PD, with the district attorney's office to make sure that we're not doing that. We have had another incident since the last time we talked. And it seems like every time there's something that goes out, this person is incited to do it more. Matter of fact, they brag about it. And so we don't want to encourage somebody to keep doing something. We definitely want to warn the public that it's out there. It's a hate incident right now. Like I said before, it's not to the level of a hate crime. I hope it doesn't get to that point, but if it does, we know who this person is. We can directly go and arrest
Do you have identified who it is specifically and know their whereabouts?
them. Yes,
And this is a La Mesa resident.
it is not.
Okay. So I thought, thanks for clarifying.
Chief, on that point about the hate incidents versus hate crimes, there's reading the story about the San Diego City Council, and so they're trying to increase the legality, the crime that's being committed. So are we planning anything like that? Do you know?
I did read that. I don't know that we're planning anything at the moment. I know that we'll see what happens with the city of San Diego. When they do that, I don't think it's come forward yet.
They're still under city attorney review.
Yeah, so we'll watch that closely. I mean, I think like I said before, it's a disgusting thing. I think anybody that sees it would feel the same way. And so, we're monitoring it closely to make sure that doesn't rise to that level. But if it does, like, you've got all the pointers.
You're ready to just pounce when it happens.
We're ready, right? Thank you.
Next on our agenda, 5.3, the independent police auditor update. I don't know if Rick's live and capable or not.
You're gonna need to make him a panelist or promote him, please.
He's joining as a panelist. He didn't do it.
Whoa,
Rick. You made it.
it's been a great tech day. So IPA report, I think we've completed 2 more audits since we last spoke. They've been forwarded. There were no real issues. They were both very cut and dried. So that was audit 2209 and 2303. And we're currently working on 2305. So we're almost, well, we are caught up. We're on schedule, on track. Nothing unusual to report. And we previously have briefed this to the chair and co-chair, but we haven't been able to since 2303 has been completed. And that's probably because the city hasn't got through it all the way yet. But both reports are lengthy, in excess of 20 pages, but the topics were very straightforward and nothing unusual. So any questions for me?
I don't believe so.
Doesn't look like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is 5.4, the presentation of the Community Police Oversight Board survey results.
So we have Dylan Scraw, who is a PhD student. I'm not sure if you finished, or maybe you're in process of, okay. He's working on his PhD at San Diego State, and then Phoebe Caderas is also, she worked on it last year, our community survey, and Dylan worked on the second year results, and right now we're collecting third year surveys. We wanted to do it over a 3-year period. So Dylan, I'll let you take it away, and Phoebe, you can go ahead and move up in case there's any questions for you about your part of the survey results.
Does Dylan have shareability to?
I do not.
We have the PowerPoint on our end, and we'll share our screen, and you just let us know when we need to go to the next slide.
Okay. Okay. Great. How's the volume? Is the volume okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So yeah, my name is Dylan Scraw. I'm a PhD student at San Diego State University in the geography department, and today I'll be presenting the results from the community survey. Next slide, please. So I'm going to walk through a roadmap of where we're going to go today. I'm going to begin with a high-level overview of the survey itself. I'll dive into a little demographic profile of the respondents. After that, I'm going to move to an analysis of how people view the La Mesa PD through scores on the survey's questionnaire. After that, we'll spend some time discussing a selection of the qualitative responses. And then finally, I believe we budgeted some time to field questions and hopefully facilitate a discussion. I'm going to be moving back and forth, so I may have changed some of the slides on my end, so bear with me, but we'll get through it. Go ahead, next slide, please. Okay, so again, we're just iterating on the previous year's survey. There wasn't a whole lot that was different in terms of the methods employed. The major difference here is that there was no collection of surveys through a public forum or any listening session this year. And as was sort of suggested in last year's survey, the inclusion of those responses may have artificially inflated the scores. And I think we'll see that play out. Next slide, please. One more. Okay, so this is an overview of the response rates. So again, no public forum this year, so 0 in that category. And the online surveys, we had a relative drop off. We had a little less than 40 fewer people this time. So go ahead and hit space. So 175 is going to be our total number of responses considered today. Go next. So here's a demographic profile of our responses. Here's 2 columns. On the left are adults, and then on the right are kids. And then we have the different ethnic or race groups stacked on top of each other to sort of show the distribution. So the Hispanic, Black, and Asian groups are more represented in the kids sample, whereas the white group is more represented in the adult sample. Unfortunately, we did not receive any responses from kids who identified as Native Americans. Next slide, please. Here's a little deeper of a breakdown by the different age groups. So you can see a pretty big concentration over in the under 18 group. And then unfortunately, a relative drop off in responses from 18 to 45 thereabouts. And then as the age groups increases, you see the white group become more and more represented. Next slide, please. Okay, so for each respondent, we averaged the scores on the questionnaire to create a composite score, which is a single number through which we understand that person's overall opinion towards the police. So this section is going to walk through an analysis of some of those questions, specific questions and answers, as well as the aggregated composite score. Next slide, please. So this is a chart of the questions that were repeated on the previous year's survey, and then as well as this one. So the first column is just the number that the question appeared on. The second column is the scores for 2022. And then the third column is the scores this year. So the big takeaway here is that all the scores decreased pretty significantly. The highest drop took place on question 6, which was that all people will be treated fairly by the law enforcement system. And again, I want to emphasize that I don't think this should be interpreted as a actual decline in opinions this significantly relative to last year. I think this is really just the result of, number one, there's no public forum where maybe we don't assume this, but we guess that people who are going to attend those may have outsized, more favorable opinions relative to the general population. But also just a lower participation rate. I really believe that if we got a larger sample or maybe even just a slightly different sample, this could have been very different. Next slide, please. So this question was not repeated outright, but it was sort of reframed to be more specific. So in the 2022 version, it asks, I believe my identity is a factor in how I am treated by officers. Whereas the 23 response specifies that my identity is going to result in me being viewed negatively. Again, there is a pretty steep decline, but it is in line with the larger trend. It's just over 1 was the decline and should not be seen as a major detachment or the result of anything specific. Next slide, please. So these questions were included this year, but not last year. These are questions that are intended to understand people's opinions regarding the May 30, 2020 incident. So I dove a little deeper into these questions in particular. Go ahead and hit space for me. So largely we find that roughly half of the sample had no change in opinion, right? They feel the same way before as they do after. And as well, there's a very close split between opinions that became more and less favorable. So I also asked, what about people who got much more favorable or much less favorable? Hit space, please. And so we find that of those people, only 5 of them became much more favorable, which I defined as just 2. So if you were at a 2 for question 3, but question 4, you said 4, you got put into this group. And then on the other side, you see there was a much higher rate of people became much less favorable when this question was included. So the takeaway for me is that these questions had little impact on the aggregate composite scores overall, but the fact that it was included earlier in the questionnaire may have actually primed people to have less favorable opinions on later questions. So I think it was an interesting question. I'm glad it was included, but I also think that the further that we get away from that summer, I just question the usefulness or the relevance of these questions. But there you have it here. Next slide, please. So the cool thing about the composite scores is that I can aggregate them to specific groups of respondents. So here I've done the adults versus kids comparisons. This graph is called a violin plot, and the individual ticks on the plot are the individual composite scores of each respondent. So you can see it's relatively similar, the spread, right? There's a concentration of responses in around the 3 range, and then there's extreme opinions on both sides. The kids plot is a little more concentrated. That's why the belly, the middle of it, is a little wider. There's more people that land like right about on 3. So this is the distribution there. Next slide, please. So I did the same distribution, except this is breaking it apart here by ethnic group. The white dots in the middle of each violin represent the statistical average composite score, right? So you can kind of see the variations. Not too disparate, but there are for sure there's differences, right? Next slide, please. And then lastly, this is the same breakdown by gender identity. Quick note here, the decline to state group was 5 people and the non-binary group was 2 people. So this matters here in a second when I'm going to talk about the statistical tests. Go ahead, next slide, please. Push space. I performed a number of statistical tests asking if the average composite scores changed, or I'm sorry, if the average composite scores were significantly different between each groups. This is called an ANOVA. It's the same test that was done last year, and it basically asks if these differences are true to a generalizable degree. The bottom line here, I'm going to go through this really quickly because these results are mostly inconclusive and there's just not much information to be gathered here. So go ahead and hit space. So these are relatively low F statistics and relatively high P values, which just means that there's a lot of noise in the data. So here I'm breaking down the different groups that were testing the differences in means, right? So across the ethnic groups, are composite scores statistically different? This would say no, right? All 3 of these, you say no, with the exception of the gender grouping. So I did do these for all gender groups included, which give us a very positive result or a significant finding, right? But again, with the inclusion of those 2 groups, the decline to state group and the non-binary group, I thought this may be making the test a little less legible. So as a sensitivity analysis, I reran the test with only people that I identified as male and female. And that test is not significant, but it's much closer to the critical p-value, the 0.05. The gender binary is much closer to significance than the rest of the groups. So hit space. Again, the bottom line is here, the statistical tests are largely inconclusive, and the power of the statistical test can grow with higher participation rates. Push space. If anything, statistical tests, they suggest without any certainty that systemic differences in these composite scores may be more pronounced by gender groups than by ethnic groups or age groups. Next slide, please. Okay, here's where stuff gets interesting. So respondents were asked, do you have any comments or concerns you'd like to share? Push space. So I processed a total of 21 of these responses through a method called thematic coding, where I basically assign the response a keyword that sort of indicates what it's about, what its values are, gives us some information about the responses were. And then you can look at an overview and see what most people were talking about, right? These responses are non-exclusive, so they may fall into one or more category. Push space, please. I'm going to walk through each of these categories and give what I hope is a representative view of what the category is about. So traffic, there was 5 people in this group. As you might imagine, most of these were critical. Nobody happily writes about traffic or traffic enforcement. Usually things about traffic violations, right? Running stop signs. I don't see the police giving enough tickets. Traffic's getting worse and worse. But yeah, this is the traffic group. Next, please. So youth, it's very unfortunate that most of the youth that responded to the surveys did not give qualitative answers. These are probably the deepest responses that we got from young people. However, both of these indicate that La Mesa PD outreach efforts are beneficial and are generally seen positively. So this is a good sign, I think. Next slide, please. Next is the personnel group. There were multiple people that had very good things to say about the chief. See this first one especially. This is a white female, age 55 to 65. I truly appreciate the new chief's efforts to repair trust with the community. Please hire more POC officers. And what I want to point out about that response is I included their composite scores, right? So this person's composite score is very low. 1.4 is a very low composite score. But they are saying positive things in the qualitative part of the survey. And specifically, they point to please have more inclusive hiring practices. This is actually pretty common. There was multiple people who had low composite scores answered very negatively on the survey, but had but praised current efforts both by the department and the chief specifically, and then specifically asked for more inclusive hiring practices. The second one here, I would like to know that all police officers get de-escalation training as well as anti-bias training. And then the very last one, based on all my years of living here, all my interactions have been very positive. I think things are better with the new chief. Leadership matters. Okay, so these are all very encouraging. Next slide, please. Okay, safety management. So this was a lot more varied. So I liked to include this one because they specifically shout out the home program. I really like the home program. I think it's good. But also this second sentence here, I don't expect change overnight, but do expect continued momentum forward. This is sort of the vibe that I got from most of the qualitative responses, right? There was a lot of people who had not extremely positive things to say, but were relatively optimistic about the future of La Mesa PD based on current action. So I think this is all encouraging. And then lastly, there was a few people who made reference toward this conflict between city management and LMPD. This is one of the very few Native American responses we got, so I was happy that they included a qualitative answer as well. Okay, one more click, please. Okay, this last one that I'm going to present from safety management was our longest response. I had to cut it down pretty significantly to include it on the slide. And I'm only going to read this bolded part here. I didn't bold it on this one, sorry. So look for the ellipses on the second line. I noticed this survey had some questions about May 30, 2020, and I must share with your board that the findings published in the contractor's written report did not explain why appropriate levels of force were not used to defend our public buildings and streets. Specifically, what is the tripwire to shift from non-lethal to lethal weapons? So this is a white gentleman, age 45 to 55, had a relatively average composite score, but I included their questions 3 and 4, right? Question 3 was, how did you feel about the police before May 30? And question 4 is, how do you feel after? So you can really see the drop off here. I have not read this report that he's referring to, so I can't speak on that at all. All I can say is that further escalation and loss of life on that day would not have made things better. But I wanted to make sure and present this response here so that we can contrast it with the next response. Space, please. So lastly, the race and ethnicity code. I'm scared to death for my 16-year-old son. I can protect him from drugs, but not from the police. I blame myself for not teaching him the truth because he's innocent and believes all police are good. He still loves to talk and joke with them as he did when he was young, but I'm afraid that he will end up dead if he meets someone who misunderstands him as a threat. This is a Black gentleman, age 55 to 65, had an extremely low composite score, one of the lowest on the survey. He answered 0 to everything except for question 5, which question 5 was, I believe most La Mesa PD officers will react appropriately to a situation. So again, it's all about the continued momentum forward, right? Even the low scores, this is obviously a very pessimistic point of view, but there is a bit of silver lining in their score in just that, yes, I'm very pessimistic about the police. I'm very afraid of the police. However, I believe La Mesa PD officers will react appropriately to a situation. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to wrap up here. I'm going to give just a few recommendations based on what I've seen, and then hopefully we can have a good question and discussion section. Next slide. Okay, above all, in regards to the survey, we are limited in the conclusions that we can draw due to a lower response rates. It should be the priority of the board to increase participation rates for 2024, particularly with young adults. All feedback indicates that outreach efforts, especially to schools, are well received. In the forthcoming report, I'm going to include all of the responses, including the qualitative feedback. So consider incorporating the qualitative feedback from people, especially with low composite scores, into both outreach efforts and general department policy. And then for the 2024 year, consider focusing the purpose of the survey, especially as it comes to reaching more young adults. My understanding this time around was that the purpose was to engage more with high school age children. So in order to do that, the board engaged with schools and districts to try to get them to participate in the survey. My recommendation would be to start talking to them now, if that is going to be the purpose again next time. Start talking to them now and say, hey, sometime in April, we're going to want 15 to 20 minutes of every student's time, so that we can increase the response rates and hopefully be able to draw some deeper conclusions. Next slide. Okay, that's it. That concludes the presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me. This is not directly related to my research personally, but I do consider it good job training. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'd be happy to field any questions.
So I have a question, Dylan, about, you said increase the participation. So what would be a good number to kind of aim for in terms of respondents?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that it really depends on the goal. So this time around, you know, I tried to look at the different statistical tests I was running, and with the example of gender identity, this is not the best example because there were multiple groups where there was significantly fewer responses than other groups, right? So especially as age groups increased, there was more and more representation from white groups as opposed to other ethnic groups. Generally, like rule of thumb for statistical purposes is 30 per group. So we did clearly reach that in some areas, but not in others. And that doesn't take away from the responses of the survey that we got. It just means that we're not able to make the same sort of statistical inferences. But generally, I just think you get more information, right? You get more people who hopefully will give qualitative answers, because the composite scores are useful. They're sort of a good barometer for how people are feeling. But the real information, the real actionable things are going to be in the qualitative answers. And we only got 21 of those this time.
I've got a question, Dylan. So we had some different questions from 22 to 23. Why were we using different questions? Oh, maybe I'm missing something. Why were some of the questions different?
I can't speak directly to that. My recollection is that the questions were dictated to me. Perhaps I'm wrong about that, but I don't recall coming up with any of the questions myself.
Okay. And I had a second one. There was a mention like a gender binary, and that I'm guessing that they were more positive responses for one gender versus another, so more for female. Am I guessing right?
Right. I didn't specify. It was actually higher composite scores for males relative to female, not by much, but it was statistically conclusive if you include those other groups, right? But if you go back and look at that slide, the violin plot for gender does have the male, the dot that indicates their statistical average is slightly above the female's average score.
Dylan, I have a comment. With our population here at what, 65,000 in La Mesa, it seems to me that the number of respondents is very low. I feel like we do need to reach out to the city and to make sure that people are aware that this is that the survey is going to be taken. And if you wanted to have more of the younger group respond, maybe the people that are here on the board could reach, that are involved with the schools could reach out to the schools to somehow get some people involved to do to be able to respond. I just feel like this is a very, there's 275, doesn't seem like a lot for our whole population. And I don't know what our statistics as far as, age breakdown is here in the city. How many of those are adults, children, or the racial breakdown either, or male, female, I'm not too sure. I don't have that statistic in front of me, but it just seems like we really need to work harder on getting the information out.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because the under 18 is a little easier to reach because you can go directly to the schools, right? You can say, look, there's however many classes of juniors and seniors, and we want their opinions moving forward, and the schools can make them, they can file them into a computer lab and make them take the test. Recent graduates are going to be much harder to reach, right? The group that we were really missing was just like 18 to 24, and particularly just above that, like anywhere between 18 to 44, right? We're relatively low responses. That's a much harder question. Yeah, I mean, you can reach out. Some of them will be on Facebook, right? Some of them did respond through Facebook. But I might reach out to the schools and say, hey, do you have a list of alumni? I might even check nearby community colleges and see if there's anyone there who might be able to speak about their experience in La Mesa. But yeah, I mean, again, it really depends on the goal. It really depends on if the goal is to get a larger view of, like, a holistic view of La Mesa overall, or if we want to just know about what the opinions of kids versus adults, or just the opinions of kids, right? So that was my recommendation at the very end, was about focusing the survey, and in this third iteration, think about it like a research project. I need a research question, and then I need a means to solve it. But yeah, I agree that the overall response rates was a little bit disappointing, but you also can't like make people take you don't want them to take it at like gunpoint, to use a bad metaphor, right? You want people who are going to be enthusiastically responding and giving their honest opinions. So if you have a person who legitimately doesn't care or doesn't want to take the survey, you also don't want to make them take the survey too. But yeah, I agree. It's a very difficult question.
Dylan, John, thanks for the report. Would it be fair to say that to have like an ideal report would be to have like the same sample size for each category year over year?
Yeah, I mean, for statistical purposes, yeah. I
guess the question is, what would be the ideal if you were to create, this is how I could get the best information. What would you recommend as to the ideal numbers in terms of what's ideal for you as a statistician?
Ideal would be 30 people in each race, group, gender, race, age, gender. So like in 18, you have 30 of each. In 18 to 24, you have another 30 of each. This is not realistic though, I think. And maybe in the presentation I was a little too critical. I do think that the statistical tests are not a necessity, right? They're not. All the statistical test tells us is, are they different, right? And you might argue that doesn't even really matter that much. I think what matters more are the aggregate composite scores within each group, but also the qualitative element, right? Why do they feel this way? The statistical test doesn't necessarily give me the tools to answer that. It just says, do white kids and black kids think about the police differently? That's it.
I am not looking at a copy of this survey right now, so I can't remember. Did we have anything in place to verify that these people lived in La Mesa, or do we know how long these people have lived in La Mesa? I think that would be certainly interesting, especially with the questions regarding pre-May 2020 and post. Because if people moved here afterwards and they saw, you know, from an outsider's perspective, they might think differently. I don't know, more positive or more negative, but possibly differently.
Possibly, yeah. There was a few questions, but nothing for actually verifying, right? It's all self-reported, right? But we did ask questions about what zip code they were in. I believe there was a question about do you work in La Mesa? Do you live in La Mesa? Do you go to school in La Mesa? Do you shop in La Mesa? There was like a kind of a four-parter there. But in terms of like verifying factually this person does live here, they've lived here for X amount of years. No, there's nothing like that.
So in your final report, are we going to see any of that information regarding like how many of these people just work here or just shop here or live here, or are we not going to see that data?
I can certainly provide, it is my intention to digest everything that was provided in the survey and give it to you in a way that's legible. That's sort of the question, right? Is how legible is that data going to be? That was not a question I looked specifically at for the purpose of this analysis, but I do understand why it's important. I will certainly investigate and provide at the very least a short paragraph about what I conclude about that question.
Thank you, and thank you for presenting today. Great work.
Thank you.
Dylan, I noticed from what I remember from Phoebe's report from last year's data, it seems as though the youth had a much more positive response. And I think a lot of that's because of the outreach that the chief has done with the schools, and particularly at Helix, where we get a significant response from the youth. And I think, you know, I noticed that that's really an improvement from the first year, and I'm hoping that by the third year it'll be even better. So yeah, it was good to see the youth giving positive comments too, because, you know, the chief fielded some really difficult questions because they're watching national news and they're thinking all law enforcement agencies are the same, and the chief did a good job of explaining how they work differently. Each state works very differently, but even within cities or various agencies, they work somewhat differently. So, you know, it helped the students to understand that La Mesa Police Department might not necessarily be blamed for something that happened in San Diego. And so just that little bit of information, I think, is helpful for people to understand, because they kind of view, oh, CHP is the same, you know, all law enforcement agencies are the same. They're not, you know, and they all do things slightly different, but, you know, I think they all try to measure up, but of course, La Mesa Police Department is the best, so.
According to the survey, right? Yeah, I think that's what it shows, is that there were a lot of people that had unfavorable opinions about the police. And I think that, yeah, a lot of people do think of the police as like a cultural American institution, right? There are specific departments throughout states, throughout counties, right? But people do think of policing, I think, as a culture overall. Not everybody has the time to attend meetings like this, or even like look at stuff online. People are busy, you know. So it is what it is. I think that what the survey shows is that the outreach effects have been useful, in particularly in schools. So I think that's a positive thing. Yeah.
Dylan, thank you for your research. You did a great job.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add is, you know, you may or may not know that the city does a survey every 2 years. The survey is sent out to, I think they got about 16,000 residents, I believe. I have to.
Yeah, it was exciting.
It was a
about that.
good amount.
Yeah.
And we, after 2020, asked that questions be added regarding La Mesa PD specifically, so that we can start to address, you know, on top of what you have here. We want to know what people feel about us too, and their safety and all that. So those questions are in there, and that's probably something that can be, you know, kind of looped together, because I know we just finished that survey.
I think in the past, or all prior surveys, they didn't disaggregate data by race, I mean, they really left out a lot of demographics.
The analysis was not
It was
great
not
either.
great.
I remember looking through that and
Really
being
not.
very disappointed.
Yeah, we
So the
really.
survey it does include race, it does include
Now,
everything.
But they didn't do the analysis. I don't know
ask
what
the
it was.
questions.
It is this one, so if you go back in there, the survey was kind of redone, so you could read the methodology of how it was actually done. And it will kind of point to some of your questions also asking like, what is a statistically valid survey and how you get to that point.
The
So we
current
pointed to
survey
it.
did add ethnicity.
Yes.
The
You
former survey
outsource that?
yeah, the prior surveys you're referring to did name suffix recognition, which has its limitations, right? And that's what I think you're referring to.
Mhm.
The current survey did add race and ethnicity questions to it. And if you want to reference the council meeting where the True North gave the presentation, it is on the city's website. You can see more data on that. So that was addressed.
When did that,
I'd have to get back to the board on that. I don't remember the exact
so
date.
did they do the survey just this past spring?
Yeah, and presented it to council. It had race and ethnicity questions added specifically due to the feedback received by this group and others. Results were quite good, actually. The difference between that survey and this survey is that survey is a statistically a valid random sample survey, different than a self-selection survey like this. The two vary greatly. And not enough time to talk about those pros and cons of both, but that is a different methodological approach by a firm that is very well known and it does a tremendous amount of work for cities and legislative bodies in California. So you can have access to the survey if you want, but I would encourage you to watch that council meeting so you could see how those questions were added to address that concern that this board raised.
So where, does the city have on their website, does it have the results?
Yeah, the survey is actually on our website. If you go on our website in the upper right-hand search box, you type in 22, or you could type in community survey. It'll come up. It'll be the 2023 community survey. Seeing questions asked for continuity and trending data, but at race and ethnicity questions added this year and spoken to and addressed by council at that meeting.
Did they disaggregate it by race?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes, it goes through, but if you go to the first thing you hit is if you do survey, it's the very first one and it has all of them on the website as well. So you can see the 2023, 2021, and you can see how they differ drastically on the makeup of them. And it's 74 pages. So towards the end is where you'll be able to kind of see more of the raw data where it kind of distinguishes that as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry.
Anybody has any more questions?
Phoebe, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add or in addition to what Dylan covered.
I was just here to take notes for him.
Okay. But thank you for doing the first year and Dylan, thank you for doing the second year and
That's a great job.
yeah,
Thank you.
great. Welcome.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you
Yep,
both.
thank you.
I would like to push item 5.5 to the next agenda. We're gonna need a little more time to go through the work plan.
Okay.
I don't feel like we have it at this meeting now. A lot of beneficial time was spent on the survey. If the board is okay with that, I would like to push this item to our next meeting. We need to go through the work plan in a little bit more detail than we have time for now. There's been some, the work plan needs some updating. We need some direction from the board on what to focus items on for the annual report. But I would like more time than I have now to go through some of the accomplishments of the work plan where we've got good success and where we have some areas that you might want to consider working on. So if that's okay, I would like to push that item, go right to 5.6, just due to time.
I don't think we need to vote.
You do not.
Okay, well, let's do that. Okay, we'll move to item 5.6, committee appointments. We wanted to just make sure that all of the board members were involved in committee of some type, just to be able to keep a conversation going and the learning continuing. And I think,
You mean the ad hoc committee?
yes.
If I may,
Yeah.
Leroy, I'll
Okay.
add to Leroy's introduction. Many of the, quite a few of the work plan items are gonna be fueled by the work done by the subcommittees. And I think if I have this right, Leroy wanted this placed on the agenda because we have some new members and we wanted to go through who's on what subcommittee and try to fill the rest and add them to the different subcommittees and then schedule those subcommittees to continue work in their respective areas. I'm gonna read off who is in which subcommittee, and then we can identify opportunities to add. The Policies, Operations, and Trainings Board Member Cazares, Board Member Gomez, our IPA, Rick Rasmussen, and Lieutenant Travis Higgins. Community Police and Outreach, Board Member Tiffany, Board Member Dement, Carissa Croxton, who is from Bartlett James, our IPA, and Lieutenant Scott Hildebrand. Hiring Practices, Promotions, Employee Wellness and Programs, Chair Johnson, Vice Chair Castaños, Dennis Montejano from our IPA Bartlett James, and Lieutenant Katie Lynch. So anybody not on one of those boards is, I think, who you are wishing to address.
Yeah. I wasn't on that. Right, so.
I think we were on the one that I.
Yeah, we're doing like a mediation.
Yeah,
That's a little.
Is that different?
Yeah, separate from this, and I'll speak to that briefly. We've got Oktoberfest coming up. We've got some staffing challenges right now. I had to cancel that meeting that you couldn't attend.
I
So-
could have attended after all.
You could have attended after all? Well, you're gonna get
Now that it
an
was canceled, I could have.
you're gonna get an opportunity again, because I'm gonna reschedule it. I just needed a little more time to work on the scope of work
Yeah, okay.
due to some internal staffing thing, the vacancies at the city and Oktoberfest coming up, which
Yeah.
the city's highly involved in. So it was really just a staff time issue, nothing else. You're gonna see an email shortly rescheduling that, so we're gonna put you back on it. So that, I just want to address that.
But that's a little separate from these.
Separate
three.
from
That's
the
the-
different subcommittee.
So the folks who did not hear their names, we'd like you to pick one of those three and join. Yes.
Do community policing?
Community policing and
Yeah, that's
outreach is
outreach,
a subcommittee.
Yeah.
That is a defined subcommittee.
Big part of that. Yes.
Okay.
Can you repeat?
Yeah.
Policies, operations, and trainings. Community policing and outreach. Hiring practices, promotions, and employee wellness programs. Three subcommittees.
I think I'd like to do the policy and training, so.
Okay. And
Be the last one.
Welcome on board.
I'm sorry, Board Member Wayne, you were.
Yeah.
Community policing?
And then Fonseca.
I'll do the
is
last one.
Last one.
You're looking at the hiring.
And then, okay, Michaela. So 2 added to community policing and outreach and 1 added to hiring practices?
No,
Am I-
no. Blackman is
Yeah.
the first one, training.
I'm sorry.
The easiest way is just to refer to it as hot committee.
I haven't. So.
You're in a police department now, you know.
It's legal.
It is legal.
I remember when it was illegal. Most of my life, it was illegal. Okay, we're gonna do this all in one motion. Okay, once we get it all, we're gonna do it all in one motion. I think that makes it easiest, correct? Okay,
Well.
Yeah.
Danny, or
I'll
did
take,
you?
what is it, the training and,
Okay.
yeah,
Police operations.
yeah.
police operation training, okay, so.
Yeah.
You like part two? Okay. Okay, does that address everybody? Sure. All right, so let's do it all in one motion and then everyone can vote. See if I can get this right.
I can do it.
Go for it.
I make a motion to place our committee, our CPOB members who have volunteered their time on an ad hoc committee onto these ad hoc committees moving forward.
Can you state all the names to?
Yeah, she's gonna need all the names.
All right, it's gonna be committee member Blackmon and committee member Walk Up on the policies, oversight,
Operations.
operations and training.
Yep.
And then we have
Board Member Wayne.
Board Member Wayne and Board Member Fonseca.
Two different ones, so
Yeah.
just board member Wayne.
Just
Board
Board Member Wayne is going to be on
Community
Community
Policing and
Policing
Outreach.
and Outreach.
Yep.
And then Board Member Fonseca is going to be on the
Hiring
hiring practices
Promotions,
Promotions,
employee wellness
and employee
programs.
wellness programs.
Excellent job.
You gotta fed it to me.
Memory.
I still
Good.
second. Nice.
Need a second.
I just, yeah.
Okay.
We got one.
Seconded by Board Member Tiffany. And then now we will vote.
Board Member Wayne, how do you vote? Board Member Walker, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Tiffany, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Fonseca, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Gomez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Casares, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member Blackman, how do you vote? Yes. Vice Chair Castano, how do you vote?
Yes.
Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries and passes.
Item number 6, staff and board member announcements.
I just wanted to mention the mediation policy, but I already did that, so no more.
And our adjournment.
Do you wanna mention our presentation at a
I
committee
have a
meeting?
lot of notes like that.
Just.
I'm weeding them out.
Yeah, so Leroy and I presented about the CPOB to a community gathering and it was very well received. We obtained, by the way, Dylan, we obtained 55 surveys, hard copy surveys. So that's it's good to get that on paper. The chief wasn't able to attend because there was some mix up about his participation at another event, so he just had to bow out, which we understood, but we represented him very well, I think, and tried to answer the questions, but there were still more. So we'll bring those to future meetings so that he can address some of the concerns or questions that the community had. And Susan was there and that was helpful, and Lauren was there. So they helped us with the survey, and we really had to, by the way, we really had to kind of nudge them to give us the qualitative, could you just write something, what do you, what's your perception? What do you hear from people? And so we got some good responses. So next time we'll have more.
Announcement, October 7th, La Mesa Parks and Rec Foundation is having their annual La Mesa Rocks event. It's a lot of fun. It's at the Allen Airway Museum in El Cajon, October 7th, a lot of fun.
You gotta have these little Mesa events, in La Mesa. In
I
the
know.
future.
We used to have it there and we outgrew the space.
Okay.
We used to be at the community center, and so El Cajon's the closest. It used to be by the water, but it's a great venue, and you don't have a venue here in La Mesa, kind of.
Right,
gather.
big enough.
Yeah.
Is anything else you'd like to announce?
Oh, I could just really quickly, if you go to Channel 10 News, there was a nice segment on La Mesa last night about La Mesa's LEAP program, which is an entrepreneur program, and it discusses new businesses, specifically a new one that's going to be opening on Jackson near the Baskin Robbins, so right there. And so just if you can watch Channel 10 News, it's a really, I think you'll be proud to be a La Mesa resident. That's it.
I didn't know if anybody was aware, but the NACLS is having their 29th annual conference coming up November 12th through 16th. I didn't know if anybody was going.
Where is it?
Chicago.
Oh, Chicago.
Anybody
Gonna
want
be
to
in
go to
that
Chicago?
area a few weeks earlier than that, but not that.
It is.
I volunteer to go.
There you go.
There you go.
All right. Anybody else? Meeting's adjourned. 5:23.
5:23 adjournment. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank